Hi, I'm Chris. Glad you guys are socializing well. I'm the mentor in residence here at NUS Enterprise. I think I also have the other dubious honor of having been a mentor in all of the Lean Launchpad sessions up to date. And one of the things that thank you very much. One of the things that we've always found a little bit challenging, which I'm going to talk about today, is sometimes the process of getting interviews. I'm talking a little bit about pre and post, but I'm talking about here really the process of getting people to interview. Because we very frequently the first week we'll go in and you ask people, the big thing is how many interviews did you do this week? How many interviews? It'll be like 1, 3, 2. And it's hard sometimes to try to find the right people because you obviously need a certain quantity, but you also need a certain quality. And as you're developing in the process, you may find that the people you want to interview shift. The people you thought originally I'm going to interview, as you pivot, as you look at different business models, suddenly you need to reach a lot of different people. So the example that one of the teams that Prof. Wong talked about before in the last intake, the greenhouse team, a group called Eden Clear, I was their mentor. And just to kind of show you the problem with the interview, or the challenge with interviews is we started out with them, we looked at their supply chain, and it was, at this end were the growers or the farmers, and then there were the suppliers that actually supplied the things, or sometimes the greenhouse people that would actually install it. And then upstream from them, we skipped glass, we looked just at plastic. So we went upstream and we said, okay, here are the people making the plastic manufacturers. And then upstream we found that you had several different people that were involved. And two of them, one is the people that make the resin, that you make the plastics for the greenhouse. And then the others are what we call master batchers, that they make small batches of resin that have the additives like coloring agents and things like that you find in plastic, master batchers. And then, of course, behind these guys, behind the resin would be the petrochemical people that make all the chemicals. And then behind these, in addition, they would buy some of the resin, but they would also have additive suppliers because they don't normally put the additives directly in here. They put it actually in a small amount of the plastic that goes in. And we found this out as we were doing our discovery. We suddenly found out this whole supply chain, all these people. And we realized the farmers, they gave us good information, but they're not our customers. They're not going to buy. As Prof. Wong was saying, the decision to buy your cool additive that makes your plastic better is farther upstream. So we went from talking a lot with the farmers at the beginning to kind of understand some of the problems and things they're facing. We found, well, they're not our customers. The suppliers and the installers, again, good sources of information. They helped us understand what was going on at the ground. They're also they're not our buyers. And they, okay, well, the plastic people, but they said, no, we don't do anything. You give us a formula, we just throw everything together and make it. We don't really make a decision on how things are done. So the people that really we needed to talk to were the master batchers and the additive people, sorry. And we found we didn't really know any of those people. We took us a little time to even figure out who the companies were that were doing that. And then suddenly I had to go in and very quickly find these people, and there are very few of them in Singapore. There are a lot of them all overseas. They're in big markets like the US and Europe where they're doing this stuff at scale. So anyway, that's kind of a quick idea. And so suddenly we had to go in and find these people. In addition, we were trying to find other people involved in all the different aspects of greenhouse and growing things in greenhouses, and we're looking for finding people, and again, a few in Singapore, but it's not a big greenhouse market compared to places like Europe and China and the US. So what I did is I developed this process before, but I said, okay, how do I find some of these people? I used to say when I get into doing this, I don't have all the answers. I'm like the two gurus and the student that are down at the river, and one of the gurus says, I've developed a discipline, I can walk across this river. So he gets out and he walks across the river to the other side. And the second guru says, I've also developed this discipline, I can walk across the river, and he walks across the other side. And the student's all excited and he thinks, well, I've been training for a while, I bet I can do it too. So he jumps out and falls in. And one guru turns to the other one and says, you think we should tell him where the rocks are? So this is a bit, I know where some of the rocks are. So basically, I looked at a number of different places to find interviewees. One of them, of course, you saw here. If you're looking in like the consumer market, or you're looking at people that are easy to find, like I can go and interview parents at Babies R Us, or I can go into hospitals and chat with nurses. Sometimes there are groups of people not hard to find. If you're looking at a consumer level, may be very easy to find. But when you start looking at people, professional organizations, people in universities, people in labs, people in big companies, people in government, it's often harder to find those, and particularly if you start getting outside of Singapore. So I've used a number of different things. One of them I'll talk a little bit about is LinkedIn, which is a very useful resource. How many people here have LinkedIn accounts, by the way? Everybody? If you don't get a LinkedIn account, you should have a LinkedIn account. It's like if you're in business now in any aspect, it's how people find you, it's how you can connect with people, it's how you find people. So if you don't, go out and get it and start using it. I also use a lot of Google search because you can find lots of information through doing Google search and a few other ways. And then also the second thing I'll talk about is how do you reach out to them, because that's a little bit of an art. You find the people, but we had one guy last time, he says he'd sent out like a couple of hundred requests for interviews and gotten almost no responses at all, which was very depressing to him. But then when I saw how he had done it, it was like a doctoral treatise every time, you know, lots of background information and things, and people didn't read it. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then basically a little bit on following up to the interview, and then Florence will come back in and talk a little bit later about the interview itself. So finding interviewees. The first thing is if you're on LinkedIn, you can use your own contacts and leverage those. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the methods I've used for going through LinkedIn. And this is really for the whole team. If you have a mentor in your team, because the mentors are older, and because the mentors have been around a little bit longer, we typically have bigger networks. A lot of us have bigger networks of LinkedIn contacts. So use them, use everyone in the team to find the people. And I'll talk about a little about doing some searches with keyword and company names, and then also a couple of tricks on doing it. And then the other thing is I'll talk a little bit about groups later. So let me talk first about doing a search. And what I've set up here is, I should be able to get onto my LinkedIn. Okay, so this is actually my LinkedIn page. And what I use on LinkedIn a lot, and I've got, let's see, something like 3,000 first level contacts, because I've been doing, I think I was one of the first 1 million people on LinkedIn. So that you go up to the search bar on the top left, and there are a number of ways to search. And again, as you work with it, you'll probably develop your own methods, but I typically would look and search for people. And then it calls up a search engine, and you've got a lot of different settings on the right that you can set to decide how you want to search. But let's just say I'm searching for someone in building, since I'm working with a team now doing, or actually let me go to cooling, since I'm working with a team doing cooling, or air conditioning. So I could actually, very simple searches, I could say, okay, I want to look for air conditioning. Everybody involved in air conditioning. It starts pulling up lots of different things, and I'd say, okay, well, I only want my first level connections. That's the people that I'm actually in contact with, where something about air conditioning shows up in their description. And then suddenly I find, well, I didn't know Mark is doing work now in air conditioning. I knew he did work in cooling. And I suddenly find a few people that are actually in my network that have some connection with that. And again, it takes a little practice. You want to try different word searches and ways of looking at it. And that's my first level. So I've got 17 results in my first level. If I open it to my second level, which people I have not contacted, but people who know people I know, like they're, you know, the second level of knowledge, if I go to that, then it goes from 17 people showing up to about 2,667. So what I may want to do is say, okay, it's a big group. Maybe I need to sharpen my search a bit. I can also look by like location. So I might say, well, I really want to look at just people in Singapore because I want people I can interview. And when I click that, then it calls up a smaller group. So you can really look and search in different ways and begin to find people. So let's just say I found someone, this Roger Lee. Don't know who he is, but it says experiencing an air conditioning system maintenance training specialist. Sounds like he knows a lot about air conditioning. So I click on him, and then it gives me some background of what he's done. I can look up a little bit on it, find out some more about him. But the other thing also it's interesting, which people often miss, and I've used this, I actually helped a guy get a job one time using this, is if you go over on the right, you'll see a list of people that are similar to him, maybe that aren't even in your network. So you actually begin to find people that you can reach out to that have or been viewed that seem to have similar backgrounds. So you can, if you have trouble finding people, that's a way to essentially expand that. So that's a way, and again, I'm not going to go deep into it. You can learn the searching. You can look at the company. You can look at whether they work there now or before. where they went to school, all sorts of ways that you can search in LinkedIn and find information. But it's a way to begin developing contacts and kind of working out and reaching out to people. So that's a really simple, way that you can begin to reach out to people. Let me switch back to the PowerPoint. So the first thing is you found them. And let's say, obviously, if they're a first level contact, if there's someone you know, someone you contact, very easy. You just send them an in-mail through LinkedIn and you can reach out to them. But let's just say that you don't and you want to reach this person. Now the problem is if you have a premium account, which I've had occasionally, you can actually go basically send in-mails with inside the LinkedIn system to anybody there, and it'll go through and normally come through on their email. But unless you do that, you have to look at other ways to reach out. One of the ways I did, which is really kind of interesting, is I'll just put the person's name and any other information, like maybe the company or the organization, and email in a Google search line, and search it, and often I'll find pages that will list email addresses. Maybe it's a faculty page or it's a company, researchers page or whatever. You'll find sometimes a page will come up with their email address, and that's how you reach in it. So there are a couple of ways, and other people have creative ways, but you can often find this information if you want to be able to reach out to the person. The other thing is you can look for phone numbers and call, but I found a lot of times it's a bit less threatening if it's someone you don't know to reach out by email. So any questions so far? Okay. If you want to invest in it, if you really get geeky on this thing and really like using it, you can spend more money, you can get premium plans, let you do more searches, let you find information farther down your network, and let you send a certain number of in-mails. And I'll just let you go out, you can look at doing that, and there's a month-by-month plan, so you can just do it for a month or two while you're part of the program if you want to. But it's not cheap. It's like $100 a month you ask for something. So it's not cheap, but if you really are using it intensely, it can be a decent investment. I don't have any stock in LinkedIn, by the way. The other thing on LinkedIn is groups. And so if I'm looking at groups, anybody familiar with groups in LinkedIn? Anybody part of a LinkedIn group? Okay, yeah. LinkedIn groups are, and you can actually go form a LinkedIn group. That would be a real sneaky way to do a validation, would be to form a group around the topic and do that, but it would take a while. But there are groups of unbelievable variety of groups in different areas of interest. And just like I did a search before, I won't spend too much time, you can play with it yourself. Just as I did a search before for people, I can also do a search for groups. And so, again, you're working in air conditioning or green buildings, as my team is, or you're working in camera optics or whatever it is. If you do some searches, you'll often find groups of people that are together that have an interest in that area. And the first thing I do when I find a group is, a lot of times I have to join it. You can't find, most of them are closed and they're only open to the people who are members of that group. So if you think it's an interesting group, based on the description, what it talks about, then just ask to join. Now be patient. Sometimes I've run a group before, and sometimes you're busy and you don't get back every day or so to check it, and it may take a week or sometimes longer for someone to allow you to join the group. So do that early on and be patient. You can also, once or twice I've actually contacted the person who was moderating the group because I decided they actually had a lot of insights and knowledge in the area we're talking about, and they became the person we interviewed, but that's rare. So you can do that. And once you get into the group, you can actually kind of bypass this problem in LinkedIn. You can message other members of the group. Don't abuse it, because they'll come down on you if you do that. But you can actually send messages to other members in your group. And if you find people within the group that are self-identified as being interested in this space, either they're selling to it, they're making something in that space, they're buying from it, somehow they're interested. If you find people in that, it's worth doing. The goal, I think, generally when I find a group, the ideal group is a few hundred people that are fairly narrowly focused on the area that you're looking at. So you'll find some groups that are huge. There are groups that have like 20 or 30,000 people. Might be worthwhile joining if it's really interesting and what you're interested in what you're doing, but the ideal is if you can find a more narrowly focused group along the topic that you're looking at. The other thing besides being able to look at members of the group that are in your space, you can also scroll through the discussions. Sometimes there's not much going on. Sometimes people are using it more for promotion, promoting letters, newsletters and things. But sometimes I found really interesting discussions. And if you really want to be bold, you can actually post a question on what you're validating as long as it's kind of general interest in that area. And I saw a guy do that one time, and he happened to post a question on what I was researching. And they had 30 or 40 people came back and responded. I had this whole sampling of discussion on the topic that I was interested in, and people disagreeing and arguing, and it was very insightful. So that's kind of radical, you could do that. But the other thing I found is when I join a group, occasionally I would actually have members come back to me because other people do the same thing. They're kind of looking who's new to the group, particularly if it's a small group. Occasionally I've had people reach out and ask me to connect with them, and it turned out to be someone interesting to talk to. So look at groups in LinkedIn, very useful tool, and I think it's often not used enough. So this would have been one I did for cooling. Again, just did cooling, it's cooling water treatment, geo-exchange, cooling tower structure, chilling cooling practice. So probably I would want to refine the search, do like air conditioning, green buildings, other things. And then when you come to a specific group, as I said before, you have the option if you want to. There's a message box over there, so you can actually message people in that group, as I said in the past. Okay. So the other thing I'll use, and again, these are just some quick tips and hints on how to do things. This is not an in-depth course in the topic, is I also sometimes will just Google the topic. Probably a lot of you have done that already if you've been working in this field, but I'll say, okay, I'm looking at, I think I did the other day when we were talking about the prism technology. I just did a quick search on what's going on kind of in fisheye lenses. And suddenly when you do a simple search on fisheye lenses, a whole bunch of information comes out. And then you look and say, I've also done sometimes topic, and then just said experts behind it. And suddenly a bunch of people who are identified as experts in that area will show up. And you may find, again, some names that will come out of that. And sometimes it'll have contact information. The other thing sometimes is I'll also Google whatever the topic name is and just put the word market after it. And it'll suddenly give me a lot of market reports and things. Now normally you don't want to buy the market, well you might want to, but normally you probably won't have the wherewithal to buy a lot of these market reports in your space, even if they might be useful because they're thousands of dollars. But often you can find some useful insights even from the top-down information. They'll say this is a $300 million business, and they have a teaser on the market report that talks about what you're doing. And that's useful information, helps you put together what's the market size, kind of what's some of the trends and things that are going on. So there's sometimes some public information that they use as a teaser to get you to buy the report, which is useful in and of itself. And then the other thing I look at on it is to say, I've done this a few times, we've actually contacted the person that wrote the marketing report. Sometimes their name will be listed and you can contact them and say, I've got something new in your space that we're working on. We're trying to get a better understanding kind of what's going on in the market. And if they're writing market reports, if he's doing a market report on fisheye lenses, they might be interested in the fact that someone has a technology that could replace fisheye lenses, as an example. Or if you have a new technology for air conditioning, they might be interested in finding out, hey, there's this new technology for air conditioning. I'm the marketing guy. I need to keep track of what's going on. So I had one guy one time, we had a phone call with him, and he talked for a while, and he gave us some insights, what was going on in the market. He asked us a little bit of questions about what ours was. And that's interesting. That's kind of fitting in with some trends I see going on here, which was useful insights. And then at the end, he says, oh, you guys should see a marketing report I did on this other area. And we said, well, gee, we're just a university team. We really can't afford you. I'll send it to you for free, no big deal. So he sends us this $4,000 report over email for free. Anyway, when you kind of start digging out and finding these things, sometimes interesting things happen like that. You're doing conversations. And then the other thing is I look at, try to find organizations and groups, as we said, that are in your market. That may be a little farther down, but who do people get together and how do they meet? Where are the conferences? What's going on? Where's kind of the village voice? Where's the water cooler in your space that people get together and talk about it? And look and say, are there conferences, meetings, online discussion groups? Worked with a guy one time, and we were working on something, and he wanted to talk to petroleum engineers. And when I just was doing a quick search, suddenly I found there was a group here, I think in Singapore, petroleum engineers. And when I looked at it, they were having a big meeting the next week, cocktails at some hotel to talk about, it was an open invitation, cocktails to talk about what was going on for whatever the petroleum engineer guys were doing at the time. And I said, oh, you ought to go to this cocktail party, and you could meet, good chance you could have some good conversations, get some real insights what's going on. He goes, I don't drink. I said, well, all the better, because you'll be the only sober one there, and they'll be giving you all kinds of great information. So look at some things on organizations and things that are going on. And finally, at the end, are there publications that serve the market? Where do people go to read about the market? Where do people go to look at what's going on in the market? All those are sometimes sources of information, but they're also things that you should be building up. So what I would emphasize on this is, don't think of this as a one-off, like I'm going to go through 10 weeks, I'm going to call these people, I'm going to talk to you, have these interviews, and then I'm going to set it all aside and go do my business. Also think about what you're doing now as you're starting your first conversations with people that, when you actually build this into a business, when you actually start a company, create a product, provide a service, many of these may be some of the same people that you will continue to talk with. So also think about this as not like a one-off project for 10 weeks I'm going to finish, but think of this also as you're opening the door to people that you will be in contact with over time. So the other thing is, as I said, the first thing is I'm talking a little bit about how to find people to interview, some tricks and things to find people to interview. The other thing is, once I find someone to interview, how do I get them to talk with me? And it just depends. Just like you and I won't talk with everybody who tries to reach out to us. We all get emails from people that we just don't respond for whatever reason. Everyone else is that way. You answer some emails, you don't answer others. You respond to some people, you don't respond to others. So the thing is to work on a way to contact these people that will increase the likelihood that they will talk to you, knowing that probably not all of them will. And even those who will, it may take time. It may be weeks and weeks and weeks. I've had people come back to me 4 months after everything was over and say, oh, by the way, I saw an email from you back 6 months ago that you wanted to talk about something, and I'd be happy to talk. Like, okay, well, nope, not anymore. So think about it. So the first thing I said is if you know who you're talking with or reaching out to people, try to email early. Allow time. Time is not your friend in this process. You have 10 weeks. So the earlier you reach out, some guy's on vacation, he's busy, he's not answering his mail, he's whatever, gives you a little more time. And then the second thing is, please, please, please keep your email short. I've gotten emails that are like several pages, and finally after this rambling thing, at the end you're supposed to sort of figure out what they want. Make it very short and very to the point. And I'll give you an example, kind of something like I've used before. And again, this is not going to be right for all of you. Everyone will have a slightly different one. You're reaching different businesses, different points. But I said, dear whoever, I'm with a team at the National University of Singapore. Using National University of Singapore gives you, first, credibility, and it also gives you kind of your non-threatening. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm with a university. We're doing some research. We'd like your help. And that during the month of February, or February and March, or over this next month, I only have a short time. I need to talk to you now. Don't put this in your to-do list for 6 months later. I need to talk to you now. Is researching, and then a little bit about just kind of the broadly. We're trying to find out more information. We're researching. We're looking into some particular space. We're looking into how businesses cool buildings more effectively. How companies take wide-angle shots of things. How people are doing rehabilitation for fine motor skills. Whatever it is, something about what you're doing. And then I said, if you want to, you could say we're developing a technology. Some people leave that out. They say we're just doing research. This is kind of optional. It depends on who you're talking to and why. And then it says, from our early research, it appears that you're very knowledgeable about this, blah, 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 whatever. You're smart, you're brilliant, we want to talk to you. We're so awed by your brilliance. And then it says, underline, would it be possible to have a brief, whatever, visit, if they're in Singapore, Skype call, phone call with you, next Wednesday afternoon, and I've tried this before. This is like a sales closing technique. I ask you if I can talk to you next Wednesday afternoon No, I'm not available Wednesday. If I say, can we talk to you in the near future? Okay, I'm going to put it off until I have time to get back to you. But I said, would it be possible to talk to you, have a brief discussion with you next Wednesday afternoon or Thursday afternoon? And then they come back and say, no, I can't talk with you Wednesday. And then you say, if Wednesday PM is not a good time, please let us know a convenient time. So you're sort of doing, it's a presumptive close. You're saying, look, I really like to talk to you just for a brief time. How about Wednesday afternoon? If that's not a good time, would you suggest another time? And you'll be surprised, a lot of people, it's like I'm now saying, okay, I have to respond to you. I can't put this off. You're asking me to get back to you. I can't like put it in my to-do list for 6 months from now. I've got to do it now. And then let's continue. We appreciate your time and look forward to talking with you. Best regards, name. If you're using Skype, I'd put my Skype address in. And on mine, because I was trying to establish that I was with the National University of Singapore, I would put my LinkedIn profile so they could click on it and say, okay, he's the NUS mentor in residence. He must actually be with NUS. He's not playing games. Now, the thing I didn't have last time was this cool letter that I saw them handing out. Does anybody have that letter with the orange top on it? Okay, yeah, this. Scan this. Is okay? Is it okay if they scan this? Yeah. Scan this and attach this to your email. So if someone's suspicious that you're not actually with the National University of Singapore, that you're trying to sell them an insurance policy or whatever, that they will then believe you're with the National. So you could say, I'm a team with the National University of Singapore that during the month of February and March, see attached, is researching such and such. So scan this and include it. And give a copy to your mentor too, because the mentor, the last sessions I've never had that. Very useful. So anyway, this is a brief outline of how to do that. And then the final thing is follow-up. So at the end of the interview, when you finish the interview, I usually suggest that ask them if there are other people they should be talking with. Thanks, you've been so helpful. This has given us great insights. Who else can we talk to? Or if they brought up something, they said, well, you really should be, go ahead, sorry. Put what on top?
Oh, sorry. If you use you're talking about the label, the NUS label, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if your company is just started out, it's not that credible yet, do you still go ahead with it? Or does it work negatively for you if you...
What?
Like, do you still put your label, your company logos and stuff like this?
Do you want to talk with someone that's calling me from a company and may actually be trying to sell me something? It's fine, but my experience is a lot of times if I have this, I'm a company, I want to call you, I want to ask you some questions. Oh, and by the way, I'm not telling you, but at the end of the time, I'm going to put a hard press on you to sell something. So I'm just saying it, my experience has been it works better not to talk about your company, maybe not even mention your technology, although you have to kind of feel the way that works, but just say, we just want to find out more information, because you're not calling to selling them, you're not calling them as a company, you're calling them as a research team that's just trying to understand this market better. So I want to be non-threatening. So that's my experience. But again, if you want to do it that way, there's no magic. But kind of think of it from their perspective. Who would you be more likely to answer? I mean, tell me, would you, if you're in their position, would you want to talk to someone from an unknown company, or would you want to talk to someone who's with a research team from NUS?
Definitely the NUS one.
Okay, so that's my point. Right. Kind of thinking from there. Now, when you're talking with them, you can certainly share. We have we're a young company doing this or whatever, but it's less threatening usually to say we're a team, we're a project team, we're trying to get understanding, we're trying to get information from you. Just been my experience. So at the end of the interview, ask them if there are other people you can talk with, and specifically if they say, I've had guys at the interview go, well, you really, I don't really know that, but there are people in these guys over here, they would really be able to help you. Well, that's just great. Now, who would be some of them? And then also, if they can introduce you, say, I had one guy one time, he said, here are 3 guys you need to talk to. I said, thanks so much, that's great. I'd love to reach out. Would it be too much to ask? Would you be able to maybe just make a brief introduction, just drop an email and CC me, and then I'll take it from there? Because if someone, I had a guy one time, went in to meet with him, he said, I normally wouldn't talk with anybody except my buddy here asked me to talk with you, so you're getting an interview. So that someone is asked to do that will get you a better chance. And then also, I often, particularly if they're really knowledgeable, I'll say, is it okay for me to follow up briefly and maybe ask a few more questions? We may find more questions as we're continuing on this, and I I might not have all the questions right now. Would it be okay maybe in the course of the project to contact you? And I've had a few people, and occasionally I've had that some new insight or something comes up and I need to kind of test the ground, and I'll call back someone who's really knowledgeable and say, all these people are saying this, does that make sense to you, or can you help me a little bit to understand that? So anyway, I would always ask that. And then the other thing I've done a few times, not really an LLP because I haven't been leading the teams, that's a decision, would be to say, offer to share a brief write-up at the end, just say at the end, we'll send you a brief write-up of some of the findings we found about what's going on in the industry. We'd love to continue the conversation maybe as we're working on this product or working on this project. But the idea is you're opening it up for a conversation, a continuing conversation with them. And then finally, send a follow-up letter, email of thanks. And here's an example. It's just great pleasure talking with you yesterday. Thanks for including members of your team. Something that it's a real email, not just a form email. We gained some very good insights into the problem of blah, blah during the call. We hope they continue the conversation with you as we get an even better understanding of how we can help to address blah, blah, blah. We appreciate your willingness to have additional call or emails with us. Please feel free to email me if you have any additional thoughts on the topic or if you think of anyone else with whom we should speak. So it's just a nice closing letter. Thanks so much for your time and for your willingness to talk with us again. And oh, by the way, if you think of anybody else we should talk to, let us know. And then boom, boom. So that's it, very brief, but I always would send a brief thank you email to the person afterwards. Don't okay, done already, don't need you anymore, go away. Okay, so that's the end. Any questions about this? I don't know if this is helpful, if this is things you guys have done before. Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris. Question in here, it is in the email. If the member of the team is the one who writes to the institution, or company, of course it is, the attachment is, of course it is useful.
Yeah.
But how about the identification? How to say it is? Do the letter from that one? It is the only thing, because that letter, I think it doesn't specify the name. It's only general. Is that right? Yeah.
Maybe you can ask them to give you a personalized one. I don't know, but I didn't even have the letter. They would talk to me, but I would include my LinkedIn address that said I was mentor in residence at NUS Enterprise,
Okay.
and they would believe me. That was some credibility.
Yeah, because our LinkedIn is on
up to
our
you.
professional side,
Up to you, yeah. Whether you
personal
want.
side.
Sometimes it's appropriate to include your LinkedIn, a link
I
to
see.
it. Sometimes it's not. You kind
Okay.
of play that by ear.
And secondly, it is normally it is what when we discuss with the company. Normally, company will say, "Okay, I'm not aware about you and your project. Can you give me the description about your project first?" Blah blah blah.
And I did that. That's a good point. Sometimes if you have something you can share very generically, like when I was working with Eden Clear, they had an article in Today newspaper from early last year, and I would attach it just to say this is kind of a little bit about what we're doing. But make sure it's very general, kind of the space you're working in, and not too much like we have a product we're ready to sell you, or we want to close business or something like that.
So if you want to target end consumers, what channels would you recommend in this case?
I mean, with consumers, I typically have said, you see people go walking into malls and things. Like I was doing a project one time. I've done more B2B kinds of things. And you may, as you said, you may find you start out with you think it's B2C, but as you pivot, it suddenly becomes B2B. When you do B2C, I mean, a couple times I've done that, we would actually just go into malls and just walk up to people with a clipboard and just say, could I talk to you? I'm with a team from the National University of Singapore. We're working on a project to help, in this area. Could I talk to you a little bit about your experience? And then see if they'll talk with you. Maybe get an NUS shirt or something on. So that's one way, and then the other way is, the landing pages, different things like that. You can reach out. There are other ways to do that.
Yeah, just to add to the landing pages. So there's a team that actually organized a small talk or like a little forum on their topic. And they had quite a bit of responses from online.
Is that the Bird's Nest people?
That's the Bird's Nest people. And
They
they
had a way
had
of
like 100
testing
people
for-
who signed up.
A way of testing to whether Bird's Nest was fake or not. And after you see their presentation on all the nasty fake bird nests, but not want to use Bird Nest again. But yeah, they had some really interesting ways of reaching out. They also, I think they set up a booth someplace and talked to people too. There are lots of creative ways. Consumers are easier generally to reach. There are creative ways you can do that. I've gone and walked around trade shows and things and talked to people too.
Sorry, can you just put up the thank you note slide again? Thank you.
Yeah, this one. This one?
The thank you one.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. This one. Yeah. And again, don't look on mine. This isn't like a generic template because you don't want to write this and they talk with you by yourself. This is an example where you clean it up a little bit so that it's really thanking you for that, meaning thank you for taking an hour of your time and for bringing such and such in so that it's a little bit more personal. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
So those interviews are usually, you always suggest to have a face-to-face meeting. And
That's the ideal, but again, it depends on what you're doing. When I was trying to find like master batch people, they aren't really in Singapore. So we were talking with guys in Israel, in Greece, in Europe. So if that's the case, if you can't do a face-to-face interview in person, then the next best usually is like a Skype or a FaceTime where you can at least see the person if you can. And then the last is a phone call if that's not available.
okay, but very often these people will be very short of time, so would it make sense to just send them 3 or 4 questions by email and then they may just reply to those questions?
Again, it's the question, it's the qualitative, deep understanding you get from, I ask you a question and then you go like, sometimes it's just a look. I remember asking a guy a question one time and he goes like, and I'm like, okay, is there something about the question wasn't right? He goes, yeah, it has nothing to do with what we're doing. You're really missing the whole point. He's kind of a smart aleck. But anyway, so we took it off in an entire different direction. So that's the value of meeting face to face. And yeah, rare occasions, I've done a few interviews by email or like a follow-up. I've got 1 or 2, we've had a conversation before. Now I want to do a couple of quick follow-up questions as we're merging. Those sometimes will work, but the first time it's really ideally face to face, in person. If not, then like a Skype call, and if not that, then a phone call, just a voice call. And the last thing, it's very hard to get a lot of good information out of email exchanges like that. People just don't think and communicate the same way. Okay. Other things, questions? Okay. I'll be rambling around for the next 10 weeks, and what is this, the 9th Lean Launchpad? So feel free to ask me any more questions if you'd like to. Thanks.